Okay, so good morning, everyone. It's lovely to see everyone here. Most of you for the first time, and certainly a couple of people again. So yes, welcome back to this session, which is part of the Elevate programme, which is funded by the London Borough of Waltham Forest as part of their business recovery and growth scheme. And so we are very delighted to be participating in that through our company, which is Our Pledge. We are a sustainability consultancy and fundraising platform based in Waltham Forest. So we're very familiar with the area and the various opportunities and challenges of living in the borough. And so yes, we're very happy to be here and be part of this programme, looking forward as to how we can co-create a better future for the borough as a community for the environment. And I'm delighted today that we're joined by Mukti Mitchell from Carbon Savvy. And I said to Mukti earlier that I would let him introduce himself, but I will say that I came across Mukti actually several years ago through some articles that he'd written for a magazine that I enjoy reading called Resurgence magazine. And it was in that magazine that I saw there was a workshop, series of workshops happening around carbon reduction, and that Mukti was running those courses. And so part of my education has been studying with Mukti. And so I can speak firsthand as a student, as somebody who's learnt from him, that the way that Carbon Savvy approaches carbon reduction, looking at how we can all make some simple, effective changes in our lives, but still live a good quality of life, which is at the heart of how Carbon Savvy approaches this work, is Mukti is obviously the best placed person to talk about that with his positive approach. So I'm really delighted that he's able to be with us here today and to share with us some information about how reducing your carbon footprint as a business can be beneficial. So I will hand over to you, Mukti, and obviously we are here in the chat if anyone has any questions from now on in.
Great, thanks so much, Rachel. Really good to be here, and great to be on the call with all of you. Enjoyed the discussion so far, finding out about your businesses, and look forward to hearing a little bit more. So I'm going to share my screen. So the session is the business benefits of reducing a carbon footprint, and I'm Mukti Mitchell from Carbon Savvy, and it's kind of part of a two-part series, in the sense that next week is going to be my colleague Ian McQuone, who's going to be walking through how to calculate your business carbon footprint. So today's session is very much setting the scene for that, looking at why you would want to calculate it and how you can use that information to benefit your business. So the session contents we're going to look at today, some introductions, which we've already started. And then we're going to look at climate targets. So we've got an idea where the government's aiming to go. Why big business is pursuing sustainability, have a look at the big business, seeing what they're trying to do and why. And then how small companies can play their part. And then we're going to home in on our own individual carbon footprints as a great first step to understanding carbon footprints and how they work. Individual footprints and the top ways to save CO2. And then we're going to talk about how a business can walk the talk and also attract more customers by doing that. And what are the commercial benefits of reducing your footprint? So ways that it could directly feed back to improving your business. And finally, tips to make the journey a pleasure. Because at Carbon Savvy, we're very keen on quality of life and the connection with that, and reducing your carbon footprint and making it an enjoyable journey for us, as business leaders and for our customers. So introductions. We've already had some introductions, but I'd love to just go around and get a little intro from a couple of other people. And I can see a couple of other people joined, so it's good timing to do that. So I'm going to stop the share for a minute, the screen share, and just going to ask everyone to go around, those of you who haven't introduced yourself yet. So basically, just to say your name, your company, and your company name, and what the principal activities of your company are. I'm Mukti, Mitchell Carbon Savvy, and my other hat is Mitchell and Dickinson, which is a company that insulates period properties, and Carbon Savvy gives advice to businesses, councils, and individuals on how to reduce your carbon footprint and improve your quality of life. And we also provide a range of online carbon footprint calculators. So that's myself. I'm going to read out names as I go around. Alice, could you introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Alice. I work with Rachel at Our Pledge, and she gave us a bit of an introduction at the beginning, so I'm not sure I want to take up too much of people's time, but we work essentially to help and support people to become more sustainable, with the North Star of helping the planet be as good as it can be.
Thanks, Alice. And David, we had some from you already, but there's a couple of new people joined on the call, so it'd be just great to get that little summary again, if you're okay to.
It's all right. My name's David. I work at our family business, which is called Gardeners, and we sell bags. We've been selling bags in the East End since 1870, so it's a pretty old business. But yeah, we're just trying to sort of see what we can do to move a bit more in the right direction in terms of just sort of like promoting more sort of sustainable bags, like paper bags and stuff. So yeah, that's what
Thank you.
Who I am, and yeah.
Thanks a lot. That's great to hear. Love that heritage. That's amazing.
Can I make a suggestion as well? If people wanted to put a link to their business in the chat as well, so that we can look you up afterwards. Yeah, that would be great. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
And then we've got Steph. Could you introduce yourself?
Hi, yeah, I'm Stephanie Panton. I'm from the Pavilions in Marlin Park. There are two venues in Marlin Park, which is in East London, which I manage for essentially commercial hires, but we do lots of exhibitions, community work, as well as big events like weddings, conferences, meetings, etc.
Brilliant, thank you. Now, if you're there able to do a quick intro, Jessica, you don't have to switch your camera on.
I can. Hi.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Hey, I'm Jess. I am Our Pledge's marketing assistant. I joined with them in January.
Thank you.
That's okay.
And Mark Verbeck.
Hiya, so I work with Sarah at Waltham Forest and the team there at I have worked with the team there at the BIP So Local to organise, but I currently work with the Lewisham Local Authority, so we're trying to advocate for all of our businesses to grow back greener. So I suppose this is more of an educational experience for me. I'm also a business owner myself, so I'm trying to apply those practices to our businesses. So I'm here in that capacity, but also need to do some of the day work while I'm on this call. So unfortunately, I'll keep the camera off, but thank you for having me. I'm really excited for the event.
Fantastic. And could you tell us what your businesses are, Mark?
Yeah, so we do education and experiences here in the UK, kind of working with colleges, universities, academies, things of that nature. And we put together kind of programs for them.
And Emmanuel, you're back. We're just doing another, we had kindly from you earlier, but since there's some new people on the call, just a quick headline of your name, company, and your business activity.
Okay, great. Hello everyone. My name is Emmanuel Squire, and my company is called FanRide, and we specialize in offering ride shares for traveling football fans up and down the country.
Thank you all for those intros. So a little bit more about my background. I love writing carbon footprint calculators, and I've been doing that for more than 20 years. And the first one I wrote for the Resurgence magazine website came first in a survey of carbon footprint calculators on the World Wide Web. I love giving talks, and I've given probably over 300 talks on how to reduce your carbon footprint and also how to insulate period properties. I love sailing, and I sailed around Britain in 2007 to promote low carbon lifestyles in a little tiny hand-built yacht, an eco yacht that I designed and built myself, which has no engine, so just sails and oars. And I sailed right around Britain, giving talks, 45 talks in little ports all the way around the coast, and sailed up to London, right up the Thames, stayed under Tower Bridge in St. Catherine's Docks. And I love insulating, well, I love old properties, and I started a company called Mitchell & Dickinson, and we do insulation solutions for period properties. So that gives you just a sense of my overall background. And I was very lucky a couple of years ago to be able to pass on the role of Managing Director of Mitchell & Dickinson to another great colleague. And so I've been able to focus more attention on Carbon Savvy, which is giving advice on how to reduce carbon footprints in all forms. So coming on to climate targets, just to setting the scene, some of you will already know these targets, but the overall scene of where the UK government is heading, and they have a binding target to cut the carbon footprint of the UK as a whole by 78% by 2035. So that's a pretty ambitious target, and to be net zero by 2050. And to clarify what net zero means as opposed to just zero carbon footprint, you've got emissions and you've got sequestration, which is things like planting trees which absorb CO2. So net zero means probably reducing the emissions by kind of 90%, but there'll still be some emissions from flights and things that are very hard to replace with electricity. And so there'll be some emissions, but they'll have planted so many more trees and done so many other activities, like even growing seaweed in the oceans, that actually absorbs so much extra CO2 that there's net zero CO2 emissions from human activities by 2050. And then UK councils and many leading businesses, so 70% of UK councils have committed to net zero by 2030. And some of huge big businesses like Grosvenor Estates, one of Britain's biggest landlords, they actually have a target of net zero by 2030. So it's amazing how many big organisations are getting on board with that ambitious target. And in a nutshell, what does that mean? It means total electrification of all activities. So everything will be electric. There will be no gas, logs, coal, anything like that. Everything will be our heating, our transport, absolutely everything will be electric. But to achieve that, we've first got to reduce our energy use by 80%. So for example, if you take a normal light bulb, incandescent light bulb, and replace it with an LED light bulb, that's 80% less. It uses 80% less energy to do the same, give you the same amount of light. Same with our homes. If we insulate our homes first, they will use 80% less energy. And then you can generate the remaining 20% of our energy requirements from renewable energy, from wind, from solar, etc. So, but if we don't make our systems efficient first, and like Emmanuel fan share, so if people are sharing lifts to go on long journeys, that's just cutting the amount of energy use. And then we have electric cars, and then we produce the rest of the energy from renewables. So, but if we don't make it efficient first, we haven't got time to build enough windmills, and also the whole country will be plastered with windmills from the top to bottom. and there'll be sort of heating leaky homes. So it's kind of a waste. So you've got to do the efficiency first. So that's net zero. And then in addition to net zero is what we call drawdown. And drawdown is about drawing down the existing excess of CO2 in the atmosphere, which is estimated to be around 1 trillion tons of CO2. And it sounds worrying, but the good news is that carbon farming, so you can run farms in a certain way, and they'll produce the same amount of food as they do now, sometimes even more food, and yet they absorb lots of CO2 into the soil at the same time. Or you can plant lots of trees, or you can do, seaweed, growing seaweeds. If 9% of the world's oceans were covered in seaweed, certain types of seaweed, and they grow for 40 years, that will absorb 1 trillion tons of CO2. So there's various different ways you can have drawdown. And the end result, I believe, of a net zero and low carbon future is that it will be a much healthier, happier way of life for everybody. So that's the targets. And this is something called contraction and convergence. You've probably heard the phrase, but basically, this is all the countries in the world. And the very top of the peak there, at the top of that graph curve, that wave, is roughly today. And basically, it shows how all the countries in the world for the last couple of 100 years have been increasing their CO2 emissions from burning fossil fuels. And so the total CO2 emissions is going right up to the top. And now they're all going to reduce their carbon footprints. But inside each country, it's going to do it according to a per capita equality. So basically, at the end, when we get to 2050, every country in the world will be emitting the same amount of CO2 emissions per person. So it kind of makes it equal and fair, if you like. Whereas at the moment, per person in the UK, we emit about 15 tons each. In America, USA, it's about 30 tons each. And in Africa, it's about less than 1 ton each. So it's not equal per person. So that's the idea of convergence, is that it starts to have this equality as well. And inside that, of course, whether you're an individual or whether you're an organization, a business or a council, if you're reducing your carbon footprint by a certain percentage, you're playing your part in that global thing. So we're equally as important as individuals in a way. You know, if I reduce my own carbon footprint gradually over 10 years by 80%, I'm playing my part in achieving this big global picture. So that's that. Now, looking at big business, and the interesting thing about big business, and I run, 2 very small businesses, but the interesting thing about big business is they can afford to have people researching the markets and what the markets are doing. And so they often have some interesting market information. And so what's happening at the moment is big business is pursuing sustainability, which we see in what people call greenwash, all these green messages everywhere in advertising, etc., saying we're green. Why are they doing that? Well, 50% of fashion executives that have been studied recently in a global study said that consumer buying choices are driving their pursuit of sustainability. So what they're finding, they're studying, they produce a couple of sustainable product lines. So they say, let's say a big clothing manufacturer produces one line of sort of eco shirts or whatever made of organic cotton or something. And then they find that people are choosing more and more of their sustainable products. As long as they're not too much more expensive, people are willing to pay a little bit more to have something that's more eco-friendly. And so big business is going, wait a minute, eco products sell better than non-eco products. And once they see that, then they're like, right, we have to create more eco lines. And every business wants to get ahead of all the other businesses. And they realize that a business that doesn't have eco lines is probably going to get left behind and not have any customers. So sustainability product lines are growing faster than other lines. Greenwash may cause confusion for a few years because everybody's saying my products are green and everybody's trying to buy a green product. But but the people buying it don't know really what is green and what isn't green, and nobody exactly knows how green is that business that says it's really green. So it's causing confusion. But the public are learning fast, and the critics who are writing articles, in the newspapers, etc., are learning fast what is really a green company and what is not. So I think over the next few years, the companies that are genuinely more sustainable are going to come through and be recognised. It's also interesting to note that environmental companies were hardly affected by the 2008 crash. So, for example, there's some big organisations in the UK which have been pursuing sustainability for a long time. There's a bank called Triodos Bank. Co-op Bank also is the next most eco-friendly bank after Triodos. There's the environmental energy companies like Good Energy, Ecotricity, etc. And then there's some big organic food suppliers. You probably know Riverford Farm. They supply veggie boxes all across southern England. You can get it delivered to your door. It's all organic. So those organisations were hardly affected by the 2008 crash. In fact, in some cases, their revenues and customer levels just carried on going up. So it seems that more sustainable businesses do better in crises, because people, what they say is that people look for businesses that they can trust and whose values they trust, and people who seem to be actually living according to some values, not just making money. And they stick with those, or they switch to those companies. And so in the marketplace, the market experts are saying that brands with sustainable products are likely to fare well in the future. Consumer trends. A global study in 2021 found that post-COVID consumers are actively seeking brands that are good for planet and society. So I was on a call with an interesting marketing expert who was giving a talk to train companies, and they were saying, before COVID, you've got a certain consumer, mindset, and then after COVID, it's completely different consumer. They're like a different person. So during the COVID pandemic period, we all had a lot of time at home. We had a lot of time to think. Often we had to save money, and a lot of people thought about what's really important to them. They also had lots of news about the environment, and there's been increasing forest fires and all those things that we see on TV. So people come out of COVID going, hey, we think the environment's really important. And even David Attenborough and some other naturalists were saying that COVID was created by a stressed ecosystem. So we need to take the stress and strain off our ecosystems, and then we'll get less pandemics like COVID. So this study was by something called The Economist, which is The Economist magazine. They have a think tank called the Economist Intelligence Unit, and they did this study for the World Wildlife Fund. And so there's a quote from the World Wildlife Fund, and it says, brands that deliver on pursuit of purpose, that drive a culture of sustainable innovation, are the front runners in consumers' eyes, and they are watching. So I want to congratulate everyone on the call today, because I've already heard, some of the comments about the businesses you're running. So what this lady is saying, Christiane Close from Global Marketplace Practice Leader from a World Wildlife Fund International, is saying that the brands, your brands, you are seen as the front runners in consumers' eyes, and they are watching and they do care. So how small companies can play their part, play our part. One is to calculate your carbon footprint is a great thing to do, because there's so many different environmental challenges facing us today, and pollution is one, and packaging is one, and plastic in the sea is one. And biodiversity, so loss of species is one. But the biggest one, which is like an umbrella, is just the problem of climate change and carbon dioxide emissions. And that is going to wipe out the human race faster than any of the other ones. So if we can address that big problem first, then we'll buy ourselves time to deal with the other problems. Not to say packaging and plastic and those things aren't important as well, but the carbon footprint is the most threatening one. So a great step is to calculate your business carbon footprint. once you calculate it, your mind just starts to think, oh, I could save this here, I could save that there. It helps you see the things that you could save. Find out which are the easiest areas to change first. So don't try and do it all at once. It's too much, and we're all running a business as well, and we've got to get on with income and managing the business. But just choose, what are the easiest areas, and do 1 or 2 things each year for the next few years. Select some key products. So some of the businesses may have different products and services, and some have a single product, single service. But if you've got different products, you may find that there's certain products that you could say, we're going to try and make those green first. For example, Pret a Manger, which I mentioned again later on, have organic coffee. So they say organic coffee, specialty teas, and healthy food, or something like that. But they're just focusing, we're making all our coffee organic. And that's a good way to kind of promote. Or you can have one particular example. You can say, we have all our paper bags are from recycled paper, for example, and it's a specific claim you can make. So lead by example. Start with your own carbon footprint, because we all have, as individuals, a part to play in this, as well as through our businesses. So if you calculate your own carbon footprint and you're on a journey of, doesn't matter what it is today, I'm trying to reduce it by 8% per year, 5% per year, whatever you choose, 1 ton a year, the amount that feels right to you, then it kind of, people can sense that you are on the journey yourself. And get your staff on board for the journey as well. Encourage your staff and colleagues to do their carbon footprints, and so that everybody in your organization is also on the journey as individuals. People respond well to that. Publicize your green actions to your customers, making simple, specific statements. This part of our business, we're starting with this part of our business. And then remember, you don't have to be perfect to make a start. You don't have to have a completely eco business, green business to make a start. Looking a little bit more into that leading by example, one of history's greatest change makers, Mahatma Gandhi, who achieved independence for India without a war, which is very unusual in history. He said, be the change you wish to see in the world. And he even had, for his clothes, he had one piece of cloth, and he used to milk the goats every day, and he'd stop some important government meeting saying, now I have to go and milk the goats. And so he believed in playing a part in all the daily activities. And so the poor people of India all thought, he's one of us, he's doing all these things himself. He's choosing kind of voluntary simplicity, almost voluntary poverty. And so when he said, oh, we want to have a strike, everybody, the whole length of India suddenly would go on strike because they believed in him personally, and they could see his integrity. So I believe that people are tuned into your integrity. They want to know if you walk the talk. And if you and your staff are saving CO2, it will rub off on other people. And every journey starts with one step. So saying I'm on the journey and I'm trying to reduce my own carbon footprint doesn't mean that I've got a tiny carbon footprint overnight. It might take you 10 years, and you might start off with a much bigger than average carbon footprint. Maybe you have lots of flight. It doesn't matter. Just saying, and you don't need to disclose your carbon footprint, just saying, I'm on the journey. I'm trying to reduce my carbon footprint by 5% per year, something like that. So let's start to home in on carbon footprints. So what emits the most amount of CO2? And we'll do our own carbon footprints in a minute. We've got a 5-minute calculator. But this just gives you an idea. What really emits CO2 from our lifestyle? So this is looking at the individual rather than business, because businesses, that picture is going to be different for every business. But a typical UK carbon footprint is around 15 tons of CO2 per person per year. And that includes all the international manufacturing in China and India and other places for our use in Britain. And it includes aviation, includes shipping. And it's in 5 main lifestyle areas. So heating our homes is about 1/5 of our carbon footprint. Transporting ourselves around our food production and distribution, holidays, going on holiday, and all the products that we buy and shopping and entertainment and stuff. They make up our carbon footprint. They're the big chunks. There's some other, lots of other smaller slices as well, but I wanted to give you a simplified picture. And I just want to touch on for a moment quality of life. And this slide just gives an indication of why saving CO2 can raise our quality of life. And I want to look at each of these areas very briefly. So what kind of home would give me good quality of life? A warm home, one that's low cost and that feels good. Well, if I insulate my home, it will be warm, it will be low cost to run, and it makes me feel good. And if you insulate your home, that reduces your footprint by 80%. And what kind of transport would give me the best quality of life? I believe being chauffeur driven, like the wealthy. And so that means to me going on public transport. If I'm driven by a train driver or a bus driver, I can sit and relax and read and rest, or going on a car share journey. Someone else is doing the driving some of the time. Maybe another time I'll drive them in my car, and that can reduce transport emissions by around 80%. And what kind of food is going to give me the best quality of life? I would like the most delicious, the most nutritious, and the food that's most low in toxins. And local, seasonal, organic food is the most delicious, nutritious, and low in toxins. And it also has 80% less carbon dioxide emissions than commercially grown, industrially produced food. And then what kind of holidays are the most enjoyable, highest quality of life? From my own life's experience, I believe that I find a holiday most enjoyable when I have an inner journey as well as an outer journey. And I find that my inner journey is stronger if I'm on ground level transport like train or ferry, because sitting for hours on the train, I go and visit my sister in Barcelona. She lives in Barcelona. Go and visit her sometimes once a year. And the train journey, I get to sit, look out the window, and sort of slowly let my worries drop away and think about life before and think about where I'm going. And it's a lovely spacious time. And always the train journey is a really important and enjoyable part of my holiday. And that international train journeys have less than 80% reduction of CO2 compared to flying. And finally, the products. What kind of products would really improve my quality of life? I would like to have the best products, the most beautiful products, the most user-friendly products, and the longest lasting products so they don't keep breaking down on me. And if you purchase quality, long-lasting products, that reduces the carbon footprint of your shopping by 80%, because if you buy a toaster that lasts 15 years instead of one that lasts 3 years, then it saves you buying 5 toasters over the same time span. And that toaster, like the Dualit toasters, handmade in England, they're expensive to buy, but I've got one that's 20 years old now. And so actually over its lifespan also saves you money. So that's a little insight into how reducing your carbon footprint can improve your quality of life. Now let's go on to calculating your carbon footprint. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this link in the chat as well. And you'll need to have a rough idea of your annual spend on electricity and heating, and your weekly transport mileages, how many flights or long trips you took, and your spend on shopping and leisure. But for the purposes of today, if you don't have any of those, you can go back after the session anytime you want, calculate your carbon footprint. It's completely free, and you can put your more accurate levels in. But you could just take a wild guess. And for a typical home in the UK, their heating bills are like about £120 a month, and electricity bills about £50 a month. So you can use those figures. I'll put them in the chat as well if you don't know your heating electricity bills, but if you've got an idea of what they are. So I'm going to stop the share so that we can. I just want to say before we go on to it, we're operating a guilt-free policy at Carbon Savvy. So your carbon footprint is personal information, a bit like your bank balance. And we can all talk about money without talking about our bank balance. So there's no need to discuss your actual carbon footprint with anyone. And so that avoids, if people have a big carbon footprint, it avoids people feeling guilty, because I feel that guilt just stops us taking part in things and engaging with things. Actually, it's pure chance, what your carbon footprint is to start with. And if we've been doing what we were taught to do in school and everything, and advertising telling us, get more money, spend more money, go on more holidays. So we're just doing what we've kind of been told. And then we get slapped on the wrist, oh, you're a bad person because you've got a big carbon footprint. So I'm saying no to that. It doesn't matter what your carbon footprint is to start with. In fact, if you've got a big carbon footprint to start with, you'll be doing more to help the planet if you reduce it by, say, 8% per year. And so we're all in this together. So I'm inviting, let's discuss carbon footprints and elements of them, but we don't need to talk about our actual carbon footprint. So the trick is to just look at your whole carbon footprint and say, which is the easiest area to start with? And also, according to you and your character, I like to work in big chunks, right? I'm going to save that whole thing. And like I had an electric car for 4 years. I got rid of my electric car and swapped it for an electric bicycle, partly for health reasons. I get some more exercise. That's like a ton off my carbon footprint. But other people like to work in small things, lots of little decisions and shopping and all these different products, etc. So we all got to find our own way to do it.
I think it was a really interesting exercise. Some of the questions that came up, I wasn't necessarily expecting that would contribute to carbon footprint. But one of the areas for me that came up was the transport. During the pandemic, I used my car a lot less. Working from home and not doing social things, that has started to increase again slightly, I guess. So I suppose it's about taking a conscious effort to use public transport and perhaps not use the car where possible.
Brilliant. Thank you, Mark. That's really insightful. Yeah, to hear that some areas you weren't expecting at all. Yeah, it's a learning journey. And if we think for us, and to be on this call, we naturally already have quite an interest in the environment. And so if you think of all our customers, they're even less on the journey than us. So it's all new. So it takes us by surprise. That's something I've continually found with low carbon lifestyles. There's a lot of surprises. Steph, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, just sort of going right back to basics, really. I did that. I had to sort of guesstimate a lot of the things because I wasn't sure within that time frame. I'll have to do it in more detail again, but I don't really know what is a large carbon footprint, what's a small carbon footprint. So it would be good to kind of, you've obviously got the figures on the right hand side, but I don't know in terms of, is that big, is that good, is that where it should be?
Yeah, so
there's a bit.
The typical, what I call a typical carbon footprint in the UK is 15 tonnes. I think the official average is 12.5 tonnes.
Okay.
That's not the government average. You'll see the government advertising about 5.5 tonnes. The reason is that they're not taking into account all the manufacturing done in China for British consumption and all the shipping and aviation. So if you see different figures, that's the reason why. But I think it's important not to get too caught up with what's the average, because if the average is, say, typical is 15 tonnes, I say typical because there's a lot of people out there on benefits, a lot of people on very, very low income who are not the kind of people who are going to be involved in stuff which would get them to hear about this call. So they're not necessarily on a call like this. And they've got very small carbon footprints, because if you've got if you're on benefits or you've got very low income, you can't afford to fly or do a lot of the things that have a big carbon footprint, or drive long distances, etc. But for more typical people, 15 tonnes. And in fact, if a lot of people who are more affluent, etc., easily 20, 25 tonnes. So it really depends on the individual, but that gives you an idea of what's average. But I think the important thing is wherever anybody starts, the key is to take your carbon footprint and say, well, what about if I could reduce it by what we recommend at Carbon Savvy, 8% per year? then over 10 years, that's 80% reductions. That's the most important thing.
Okay.
One last comment, if anybody has another comment or question, and then we'll carry on.
Well, I was just going to say flights, because mine's, good. And then you put a flight on there and it bumps it right up. So obviously during the pandemic, lots of people didn't fly, which would have helped everybody's carbon footprint. If people are flying, because there's no alternative to that, do you have any suggestions, Mukti, of how that might be? I don't know if offset is the right word, but how that might be, helped, how you can help the fact that you're going to have quite a high carbon footprint because you're going to have to take flights?
Well, the most important thing with flying, because if you take an airplane, fly up into the upper atmosphere of the Earth and emit a load of CO2, nothing can offset that instantly, because that is going straight into the part of the atmosphere where the global warming is taking place. So flights are the most damaging activity of all human activities. So the most important thing with flying is just rationalize and think, how can I reorganize over coming years? And we're not talking about work. If your work is sending you abroad, that's essential. That's a slightly different question. It's more for your boss and the energy managers of the company, etc. But if it's a personal flight, it's a matter of just looking at it and say, well, okay, so I took 2 flights last year, or let's say I took 4 flights last year. Can I take 3 this year? I have 2 holidays abroad every year. Can I take 1 in the UK? Okay, so I'd say maybe I've got family in Australia, and I normally go every year to Australia for like 3 weeks. But actually, what about if I go every other year for 6 weeks and negotiate with my boss? Look, I'm in this situation, I want to reduce my carbon footprint. Can I know it's a long time to take off, but I'll only have 4 weeks holiday this year if you give me 8 weeks holiday the following year, whatever, set it up. Because if you can take a long haul flight every other year and stay longer, you probably have a richer experience of where you're going. And the critical thing is just reducing the flights each year. Yes, you can offset, but remember that most of the offsets you buy today, you're paying to plant trees, which would take 50 to 100 years to absorb that CO2 that you emitted today. And we've only got 10 years to avert climate change. So it's the time scale doesn't work. So we're hoping to start offering this summer through Carbon Savvy the first offsets, which are pretty much instantaneous in the sense that when you buy them, they've already happened in the last 12 months. So it's not future offsets. And that's going to be a step forward, but they're going to be quite expensive. So because that's the nature, that's why they can sell you cheap offsets, because it's like, oh, we're going to plant a few trees now and we'll sell you the offsets from 50 years time in the future. Well, that's what makes it cheap. So the 10 biggest actions, the 10 most effective things you can do to reduce your carbon footprint, raise your quality of life. And these are for your personal carbon footprint, but you'll notice they do relate to a business. Obviously, businesses are so individual, you'd have to look at the individual footprint of your business, which will happen next week. So this is really setting the scene in your mind and for your personal carbon footprint. First thing is insulate your home and office and be warmer, save money on fuel bills and feel good. Switch to a renewable electricity company is a very easy step. It gives you peace of mind, and you can do that, and it's not much more expensive, and you can save 1 ton of CO2 per person per year. Travel to work differently, share a lift on a 40-minute daily commute, and that will save 2 tons a year. So taking it in turns with another person at work to drive, and public transport and cycling is even better. Downsize your vehicle, save money on fuel and insurance, plus parking will be easier, save 1 ton of CO2, or like me, downsize from electric car to an electric bicycle. And then I might hire a car every so often just for a weekend to move things around, but I'm lucky at the moment I'm not needing to drive for work. So source seasonal, local, organic food, but improved flavor and nutrition, less toxins better for health, and it supports wildlife. You can save a ton a year from that choice. And if you feel, well, I can't afford to get my whole shop organic, can you just buy organic milk? Can you just say, well, from now on, I'm going to try and buy, organic vegetables or organic fruit, or one part of your footprint. Reduce meat and dairy consumption, eating less quantity but higher quality, local and grass-fed meat. If you can inquire from where you buy your meat, have you got grass-fed meat? And some places have got grass-fed meat. That can improve health, encourage creative cooking, and save you money. Ditch a 2-hour premium return flight, taking the train instead. So it's surprising how you can get across Europe on the train. I go to see my sister in Barcelona, and that's a good 2-hour flight. It's 10 hours from London to Barcelona on the train. But actually, when you include all the check-in times and the transport to the airport and back and everything, the flight takes about 7 hours, actually. So it's not so different, 10 hours and 7 hours. And it's so much more enjoyable. You see wonderful scenery out of the window. Save a 7-hour economy flight, visit a closer destination, or fly half as often, stay twice as long for a more satisfying travel experience. You can save 3 tons of CO2 from a long haul flight. If we purchase high quality, long lasting products, that saves shopping time and money, and you have the pleasure of top quality products in your life. Every penny we spend is a vote. Where we spend every single penny is a vote. So if you can be buying sustainable products with every penny that you spend, it's what I try and do, my food, my this, my that, the other, everything. I feel like I'm giving my whole salary to charity, not just like £100 a month, but like my whole salary is kind of being given to charity. And it creates a very good, empowered feeling. Oh, I'm putting thousands of pounds a year into helping the planet. Repair, reuse, buy half your products secondhand, save money, and then you can afford. Sometimes I bought a bicycle a couple of years ago, and because I bought it secondhand, I could buy a much higher quality one than I would have been able to afford to from a new one. And so these 10 actions can reduce CO2 emissions by 80% while raising personal well-being. Saving energy increases the financial resilience of organizations. This virtuous cycle of life encourages energy, enthusiasm, and motivation, and is more attractive and influential to others, as opposed to sort of pointing your finger and sort of feel guilty, getting people to feel guilty to reduce their carbon footprint. This is more about, hey, I'm doing it, and I found this benefit and that benefit. Actually, the food is more tasty, etc. So how businesses can walk the talk and attract customers. Make a carbon plan with steps over several years. And again, don't try to do this overnight, but after the session next week, you'll start to find you've got the information, say, well, this year we could look at switching to renewable electricity. Next year we could look at going recycling on all our paper. Following year, etc. Break it down into chunks. Green the easiest areas first, like switching to a green electricity provider. Green the key products like organic coffee or cotton. Publicize specific claims like all our coffee is organic. Use nudge tactics with staff and customers. You can put a sign, putting a sign in the room saying, if you don't want your towel replaced today, then if you want your towel replaced today, put it in the bath, but otherwise we won't replace it. And then I've stayed in a hotel where they said that, and I was like, oh, okay, so they don't need to wash my towels every day when the hotels used to wash towels every day. So just little nudge tactics, little sign next to the kettle saying, only fill this with as much water as you need to boil right now. And then keep evidence to support your claim. So if you are buying all recycled paper, make sure that they say on the invoices, this is all recycled paper, and then keep those invoices so that you if anybody asks you questions, you kind of have evidence. So examples of specific claims is like all our coffee is organic, all our electricity is from renewable sources, we source organic cotton, We only use eco-cleaning products. Our fleet is speed restricted to reduce emissions. And even you can say we're committed to net zero by 2035, or we're committed to reducing our carbon footprint by 5% per year, for example. So those kinds of claims. And there's a link there. You can have this presentation distributed by email afterwards. And so you've got a link to, there's something from the government called the Green Claims Code. So I just want to touch on the commercial benefits of reducing your carbon footprint. One is it cuts costs for your business. Saving CO2 saves energy, which saves money. So if you can consolidate your deliveries, so your delivery vehicles are doing less journeys, for example, or if you're using less electricity. So for example, in the last year, I've been using an electric blanket when I'm sitting at my desk. And so I'm actually running the house at a lower temperature than I did last year. And I think I'm saving about £500 on my heating bills just for having electric blanket. And I actually never drowsy at work anymore because I'm in a cool, fresh room. So I'm cutting costs, cutting CO2 and saving money. You can increase prices sometimes depending on your business, but many people will pay a bit more for eco products. Staff retention, if you have several members of staff in your business, then I found at Mitchell & Dickinson, people who, when we first do the interview, they're not really interested in the environment. And after a couple of years, you know, I'm chatting to them at Christmas dinner or something, and they say, oh, you know, it really means a lot to me that we're doing our bit for the planet. So people, I notice people take pride in sustainable and social goals, and it helps people keep stay in your business. And motivation as well. Purpose inspires motivation. People think, I'm going to work harder because we're doing something for the environment. Well, at least I find myself much more motivated when I'm doing something with purpose. And financial stability, as I mentioned before, eco companies were the least affected companies in the 2008 financial crash. We've got uncertain futures, financial future ahead, post-Brexit, post-COVID, etc. So that can make a business more financially resilient. Competitive edge, experts say that sustainable brands will do best. So if you've got competition for the same services, then people may be more inclined and increasingly more inclined to go with you if your services are more environmental. And then future-proof as well. So you get ahead of government legislation. The government now requires any business, and I know this is quite large contracts, but for them it's small contracts. Any contract of more than 5 million with the government, that company has to have a carbon reduction plan. So they're starting to bring in more and more pressure. For example, local councils now have 70% of British councils have carbon reduction net zero targets by 2030. So now they're starting to tell all their suppliers, okay, we're only going to buy your products if you've got a carbon plan, if you're also on track for net zero. So more and more organizations are putting pressure on other organizations to have a plan to reduce your CO2. So there's some of the commercial benefits. And finally, tips to make the journey a pleasure. 1, you don't have to do everything at once. Small steps are good. 2, there's no shame in singing your successes, even when some areas of your business are not yet sustainable. So you don't have to be perfect. And maybe some people might come and point their finger at you and you say, oh, you say you're so green. Actually, you're doing this. Don't fear that. Don't fear being accused of greenwash. Be proud that you're on the journey. Take advice if helpful. Everybody's on the journey. Most people don't know carbon footprints inside out. And people who claim to be experts in carbon footprints and go around accusing others and pointing the finger are not helping us get to net zero. The only way we're going to get to net zero is everyone to be included. Absolutely everyone. People with big carbon footprints, small carbon footprints, big companies, small companies, people with 4x4s, people with small cars. Everybody's going to have to be involved to get to net zero. So we need to be inclusive and positive and welcoming. And so don't fear being accused of greenwash. Be proud to be on the journey. And it's okay to have no idea what a carbon footprint is. And because we all start somewhere, just finding out is the desire to find out, and taking steps to find out is admirable in itself. And finally, promote a positive, guilt-free culture that we're all in this together. We're not going to point the finger at anyone. If somebody in your organisation goes and flies on holiday, no comment, don't comment on it. They're on their own journey. They'll come to it when they're ready. I have people in my organisation who, fly lots, whatever. And it's like, and I used to know people who used to fly lots, and they sometimes used to talk about the environment. I never said anything, but I thought it was interesting. And then suddenly, overnight, they just stopped flying and said, oh, I'm not flying anymore. So they felt able to, at that moment in their lives, they could take on that information, they could rearrange their lives. We all have different reasons for flying, family or whatever it is. So having a positive, guilt-free culture makes it enjoyable. So there we go. And we've got 15 minutes for questions, and I'd love to hear any comments as well about thoughts you've had of things that come to mind through hearing this presentation about what your business could do to reduce its carbon footprint, or something you might promote, or questions about that. Over to you.
I was just going to say, I really like the idea of a carbon plan. I think that's really, really important. Not like we're going to stop it all today, and that, but just a gentle implementation to get to where you want to be is really important. Because, like you say, you've got lots of other things going on. You're busy, but to have that goal setting element of reducing your carbon footprint really resonated. As did the guilt-free element to it. No judgment. Everyone's on their own journey. That's so important, because I think you're right. I think lots of climate action comes with that sort of level of judgment. You have to do it all or not at all. And I think actually that sometimes stops people from doing anything. So I think totally resonated and resonates with our pledge. I think the idea that it's everyone's on their own journey and at different stages of that journey.
Yeah, and if you need a defence, you just ask anyone. If somebody's attacking you, because there's a bit of culture in some of the environmental movement, like Extinction Rebellion, and they're wonderful people who've done some really important awareness raising, but they can make people feel a bit alienated sometimes. And so if you ever feel threatened by somebody because you don't know the inside out details and you're worried someone's going to come along who knows all about it and start accusing you, and just say, is your carbon footprint zero? Have you got a zero carbon footprint? If you've got a zero carbon footprint, and please give me your advice. But it's like, who's got a zero carbon footprint? We're all emitting CO2.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm glad you found that helpful.
Yeah, I think there's an aspect of this journey where you have to be comfortable with being a bit of a hypocrite, in that you want things to be a certain way, and the ideal scenario, the ideal end goal, but to get there you just have to live within the world that exists now, that is not designed for us all to, and we deal with this at our pledge. We promote sustainability all the way, but we also accept that I drive a car. So, there are certain places, I live in Wales most of the time, there are certain places I cannot get to if I don't drive there, because it's not very well connected, and I have to accept that and know that I have reduced that our emissions enormously since we started, since I used to drive around when I lived in London, and so yeah, and being unashamed of that, and kind of being upfront about and being upfront about the process and the benefits, so everyone can kind of hear about how we did it, how we're doing it, and like you've said, Mukti, like how it feels, what's the experience like, so yeah, being comfortable with that, I think is part of comfort with the discomfort or something. It's
That's it. Otherwise, you feel. I've got friends who say they feel guilty all the time.
Yeah.
And shopping. Oh, what should I? They've got little children. They want to protect their children's future, and they're shopping. They don't know which products to buy. Feel guilty all the time.
Yeah.
So don't worry. Calculate your carbon footprint. Take 1 or 2 steps. Then you know I'm reducing my carbon footprint by a little bit. Definitely. Stop worrying about the other things, because it's a big learning journey over the first couple of years of reducing your carbon footprint. Most of your energy is going in learning. You know, what is creating the carbon footprint in my business, the biggest carbon footprint? How could I do it? And it takes time to learn and start to think, oh yeah, lots of ideas. Which one's easy to put into practice first? So a lot of energy needs to go in learning. So if you're doing 1 or 2 things and then to reduce your carbon footprint, maybe, and then don't worry about the rest of your life until you've got more learning and more time.
Yeah, absolutely. I also just wanted to apologise because my internet went down right in the middle, just kicked me off everything. So that's why I vanished.
No problem. Yeah,
So,
we saw that it was connection errors. No problem at all. Any other questions or comments so far?
I just, I think it's interesting doing the carbon calculator, and as I say, I'll have to do that as an exercise outside of this meeting, personally and also for the business. But I think, like other people have said, I think it'd be interesting to introduce that conversation with the team, just to look at what we can do internally ourselves. But at kind of 2 levels, because we've got obviously the reducing carbon in terms of our own practice as a business, but also we bring in lots of clients, and clients bring in lots of suppliers and contractors. Every event, every activity that we have here is kind of an individual activity. Each creates a lot of there's lots of different things that I think, obviously there's a lot of rubbish created in every event generally, and all of that kind of stuff. And it's just about how to ensure clients that we contact and obviously want to work with can also be sustainable, or look at how they can reduce their carbon footprint whilst being in this building. Just trying to sort of introduce those.
Yeah, it's almost like the first step is not to do anything for a few months and say, okay, we're going to actually look at our options and take some advice here and say, we're going to try and find the 10 easiest things to do to reduce our carbon footprint. But only when we've looked at the 10 will we choose which ones we're going to do to start with. So you can say, oh yeah, actually, it looks like actually all our food packaging and our cups and things like that. I imagine you have cups in your venues, and you might find that's the easiest place to start, or starting to communicate with your suppliers. We're aiming to reduce our carbon footprint, so we're always looking for suppliers that are already on the journey. So please let us know what you're already doing, so you can help to choose between suppliers. And I know events is, it's got a big carbon footprint. And some of the rock stars now and singers are saying, well, I accept. I have to fly to give concerts abroad and things, but I'm going to be doing other projects. So I've heard some of the good comments from stars who say, yeah, I'm not perfect. I have to fly to do these concerts, but actually we're looking at other ways we can reduce.
Yeah.
And I think one of the great things about getting staff to do their own individual carbon footprints is it starts everyone on the learning journey. And there's quite a lot of learning before staff and departmental managers say, hey, I've been looking into this, and actually I found these great cup suppliers, and they're like recycled cups, and it comes from this place. They kind of know what they're looking for because they've been on the journey. And actually the easiest way to learn about your carbon footprint is to do your own one, because you get what your own life is like, because you can feel it, because you live it.
Yeah.
So it's a really good place to start.
Yeah. I also think there's something about the collective in that everyone has different interests. So it sort of spreads the load in terms of, if you bring all your staff on board, well, you might find that somebody's got an interest in sport, or an interest in travel, or an interest in, gardening or an interest in, so then those people might come back with an innovative idea that they found from the area that they're interested in. So I think if you can all be on the journey together and you see your staff colleagues as a resource in that way, then you don't know what's going to come up. I always use the example of my partner works in healthcare and in anaesthetics, and that doesn't come up as a way to reduce your emissions, like stop using a certain anaesthetic gas. But actually, because that's his specialism, he realised that there are 3 different gases you can use, and one of them's really bad for the environment and one of them's not so bad. And so he basically went, well, what happens if everyone in Wales changes that? What makes that one change? Oh, we've saved a huge amount of emissions. So it might just be that there's one little tweak that one person knows about something in your area of business that could make a big savings. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you for those comments, Steph. Any other comments or questions? Or something you found useful from today, or anything you found surprising?
Hiya, I've got a question. It's regards to calculating the emissions a car produces for a particular journey. What's the best way to go about working that out?
If you the link that we used earlier for our carbon footprint,
yeah.
If you go onto the Carbon Savvy website, in fact, I'm just going to put it in just the simpler one, carbonsavvy.uk. Savvy.uk. So, it hasn't come up as a link. But basically, you go on there, there's 3 calculators.
Yeah.
And one's called the full, there's a 1 minute one, a 5 minute one that we did, and there's a 45-minute one, which is more detailed. And if you do that, if you go onto the 45-minute one, you don't have to do your whole carbon footprint. You can just do, you can go to the transport section, and they've got loads and loads of different cars on there. And you can choose the one and choose how many miles and just see what the carbon footprint is. There's the actual live link. Okay. And it will calculate for every different type of car, petrol, diesel, small, medium, large, etc., etc. And you put in your mileage. And so you can use that to calculate the carbon footprint of journeys. And if you have any problem with that, contact our pledge, and I'm sure they can advise you. And
yeah.
if they need advice, they'll come through to me as well.
Well, I was actually just casting my mind back to the transport session that we did, Mukti. So I can, Emmanuel and I have already said we're going to have a meetup to chat about fan ride. Yeah. So because I was thinking of you, yeah. So I've got some tables that we can look at that compare, because the carbon emissions of a car is different if it's just one person in the car or 4 people in the car. So we can go through that together if you'd like me to do that with you.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, and actually I've just noticed we've got 3 minutes until the end of the session, so I should probably start wrapping up unless anyone has any other sort of pressing questions for Mukti. Other than that, and I'm so curious to talk to you, David, as well. I don't know if you've actually, your business isn't under 3 years old, but we are offering one-to-ones. But our pledge also offers one-to-ones, so we can certainly speak to anyone on the call or any of your colleagues about supporting you on your journey.
That's great. Yeah, sorry, my internet has been a bit temperamental.
You and me both, don't worry.
Right, okay.
I could see you coming in and out, and then I left because my internet went down. So
yeah.
No worries. It's all been recorded. So, and I think
that's
kindly, and you said you'd kindly share the slides as well. Is that right, Mukti?
Yeah, absolutely. You can send them out.
Yeah, fantastic.
Oh, okay, yeah. If you've got a link to those files, that'd be great.
Hang on a second. Let me look at the chat. We've got here we are. Steph has bought bags from David before. How about
Right,
that?
well, thanks for coming in.
Hey, well, maybe this is like a test case where, David, you could speak to Steph about her needs for the pavilions, and Steph, maybe there's a conversation to be had around like what would be the best, most useful thing to trial for your bags, David, that would maybe help Steph at the pavilions.
Although it was
case study. Was it not for the pavilion?
Rather than so it was more of a one-off. But whenever I have a bag need, I always go to Gardeners. That's my go-to bag place.
Right. You've probably seen my father. My dad. Yeah, he's the one.
Yeah, definitely.
This is so good. I feel like we're getting little marketing taglines out of this session, particularly from you, David, or actually from Steph. Steph has now endorsed David's products. David has endorsed Emmanuel's products, and hopefully, if we give a session to Emmanuel, he will endorse us, and then I will endorse. I've already endorsed Mukti. It's a beautiful thing. So there you go.
I just wanted to comment to Emmanuel. I think saving money might be one of your sales lines, but I think also there's a lot in promoting that it's more sociable and environmental friendly way. For a lot of people, they might be more. What I found with my business is actually saving money is the last thing. People want to know they're going to save money, but if we say be warmer, be more comfortable, and save money, and it's good for the environment, that kind of thing, you might find that those things are more appealing to a lot of people. Like David said, it was actually the hassle. What I had, it was the hassle factor, not the actual money of organising the long journey across to Manchester.
Yeah, that completely aligns with some research that we did. It was slightly different because we were looking specifically at Waltham Forest and asking people about what makes them kind of shop in businesses in Waltham Forest that we were looking at. And for the most part, bye Steph, nice to see you, thank you. They said supporting a local business was a big driver. And then, yes, so it's a sort of social, local social community driver. So your people meeting each other, Emmanuel, as well, and then and environmental, and then cost as well, cost and convenience. So I think it was in that order. I'll look that up again. Anyway, I have to wrap up. We've got another meeting starting in a minute. So just a huge thanks to you, Mukti. As always, I really enjoyed the session, and in particular your kind and gentle approach to this work, which can sometimes feel very heavy and like hard. So I think giving permission to hold it gently and lightly and do what they can within within their particular context is really, really helpful and reassuring and feels good. So thank you very much for that. I'm really looking forward to the part 2 of the session. Thanks again to the London Borough of Waltham Forest for funding the Elevate programme. That means we can all be here today, and that means that people can watch this session beyond this moment now. So this will be available through the Waltham Forest Connected website. We'll circulate a list of links that are offering suggestions to other sessions that are coming up. The sessions are running into April. There are also one-to-one sessions with business advisors, such as myself and Alice, that you can benefit from if you want to have a good sort of 90-minute session looking at your business, the particular challenges that you're facing. We can help you not just with sustainability, but also in terms of business growth, investment, that kind of thing as well. Let me see if is there anything else I need to mention. Feedback form. We've shared a feedback form in the chat. We'd be really, really grateful if you could fill that in, and we'll send that in the follow-up email as well. If you have any other ideas of sessions, things that you'd like to hear about, please let us know. We'd love to speak to you all again beyond this session, so do keep in touch. And I think that's all I need to say before signing off. Thank you again, Mukti. See you next week, next Tuesday.
Thanks a lot. Good to meet you all.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck with your businesses.
Thank you.
We'll speak to you soon.
Yes, hopefully get me.
I will. Yes, I've got your email. Bye. Thank you so much.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.